Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Sexy and Geeky podcast. I wanted to get one of these done today, just because they're the fastest thing to edit and the quickest kind of to get the whole process done of. And as you may have noticed, there was a little bit of a hiatus in the new year. It's been a bit difficult. There's been a lot of stuff going on. Some pleasant things, definitely. Just took up a lot of time, and some very sad occurrences just to muddle through with. I'm doing good though. I'm working all right. Well, I'm definitely working. I'm working a lot at the moment. Except this week when I suddenly have a lot of days off in a row, and I wanted to catch up and do some videos. My backlog ran out. The auto-scheduled stuff by New Year's Eve, so I'm gonna try and recuperate some of that today. I want to get all of Drag Race, the riffs, online before the end of January when season 7 happens, because I'm wanting to get those as live as possible. I don't know if we'll be able to watch them live, if there'll be any service where we're able to, but I know both me and Mike really want to do that as soon after each episode as possible. Avoid spoilers completely for once. After the Thought Bubble episode, I discussed all of the kind of physical comics I bought recently, and all the people I saw at Thought Bubble, and I realised that I wasn't actually able to reference any of the stuff that I did online, entirely in the virtual world, because a lot of comic artists I know from America and various other places who don't go to conventions often, or near me anyway, or I just don't own physical copies of the work of. So I figured I'd do a follow-up podcast, this one, where I discuss my entire Webcomics listings, which is incredibly long. So here's hoping I don't take several hours to get through it all. Also, thing I want to do a quick shout out for is the book that I'm currently reading, a physical actual book. I say reading, it's audiobook. Audible are really good people with a good service, and I love that. I'm listening to Amanda Palmer's book, The Art of Asking, as read by herself, and it's so good. It's got so many inspirational and thought-provoking stories about her amazing life and how she's learned and practiced over time the art of asking people for things. And what kind of trade and service standards should be there for entertainers? What should entertainers expect from people? What should people expect from entertainers? Artists. Art is the difficult one to understand or monetize these days, because there's so many different versions of what is art, what is not art, what is celebrity. And so it's a really fascinating listen, and I assume a fascinating read as well. I recommend the audiobook specifically because it's interspliced with a few songs, although I'm pretty sure that, knowing Amanda, the physical book will have some photos. But anyway, for those of you who've looked at the Sexy and Geeky website, you'll know that the section I'm kind of most proud of, I update the most, is the webcomics list. I have a very long webcomics list of recommendations and things that I love and things that I want people to enjoy and find if they're looking for specific things, because sometimes certain representations are hard to find of certain gender identities, sexual orientations, character types, well written people who are usually written craply, and also it's just nice to have free reading material, especially considering comics are expensive to subscribe to, definitely physical ones. Over the years I've been to a lot of conventions and I have seen a lot of people's work, and so this list is a long one. I've divided it into a few sections. This first section is mostly safe for work materials. Anything that isn't safe for work I'll say, but none of this has, for example, gratuitous sex scenes. Starting from the top, from the left of all my tabs, which when I open up on a morning it says, would you like to open 35 things, and that's only for one of the folders. I say yes, and then I go make a cup of tea because my computer slowly vomits on itself in pain. I should really be kinder to it. First is Junior Scientist Power Hour and The Last Halloween. They're right next to each other. I like to do that with authors. They're both by Abby Howard, from Strip Search, the Penny Arcade reality TV show, when I first discovered her. And I adore her work. I adore her Yonan Vasquez-esque, Frederator-esque humor stylings that are centric to a very large and very interesting, potentially quite dark plot. But so funny. The random madcap humor is just marvelous. And character humor, so it's not completely out of the blue, stupid random. It's intelligent random, if that makes sense. Junior Scientist Power Hour is her pseudo-autobio random gag comic. It was her first thing. It was happening before Strip Search, and it's just her adventures through paleontology, her love of dinosaurs, and her daily life. But because it's Abby, they're all somewhat fictitious. They're based on obvious truths, but the things that happen with them are too fantastical and ridiculous and hilarious, and have horrible monsters sometimes. Like, there was a Christmas comic where she saw Santa at the tree, and Santa was like, "Ooh, who is this?" And she's like, "A possum, get out!" And she bats Santa with a broom, and he goes back up the chimney, and he takes off his head and looks at his possum brethren and is like, "They're on to us." It's marvelous and ridiculous, and I totally love it, totally recommend it. The Last Halloween is the comic she made after Strip Search, and kickstarted to ridiculously good degrees. She was able to pay off her student debt immediately, and I'm very, very proud and happy for her. We had an interview about it. I will link on the screen, because she was just a joy and a gem to talk to, and that was back when I did the old radio station, I think. I actually emailed her about it before Strips had ended, like episodes before Strips had ended, because I was like, I know it's not over yet and you can't talk about anything yet, but after all the episodes are revealed and you can talk and whatever, can we talk about your comics, because I really, really like your comics and you're my favourite to win, and I'm so sure you are, please. And she was totally lovely, and she did afterwards. It was great. She was she was sitting in a chair in her room, and it was horribly messy. You could hear the noises of it. We discussed it a bit, but she had like a drawing of a fireplace behind her, labeled fireplace, to make it look kind of genteel. She's a marvel. She's a total marvel. Sorry, The Last Halloween. It's a comic about the end of the world, when on Halloween all manner of horror and monsters seem to break loose from this other world, and little Mona Merkins is the only one who can stop them, but she really doesn't want to, because she's a tiny child and is like, why, how, no, get someone proper, get someone big and beefy, I don't even know. And she's thrust into this adventure she didn't want to be part of, with a ragtag group of horrifying creatures. Ringling the vampire, who has been a teenager for, well, he's a tween vampire and has been for centuries, and so he's kind of gone insane through the eternal angst and emotions that teenagers feel. Shirley, the hipster zombie, who embodies all of Abby's most hated things about hipster culture. She's so uneager to help anyone, is too busy on her phone. Banjo, the were-possum, accountant by day, possum by night. He just likes rooting through bins. Dr. Fugue, the invisible mad scientist doctor, potentially very evil, potentially their best hope. He's so cruel and weird. And the other archetype is, his name is Richard, who is a doll brought to life by Haitian voodoo, who is deadpan. He's so deadpan. He's a doll. He can't really express. And so she has to, with the help of her friends with an asterisk, save the world from horrible wanton destruction, while being followed by a strange sheep, goat, ferret creature with many arms that's really big and awesome, and I can't wait for some group of people to cosplay it. It'll need like 4 people because of how long it is. So cool. Warning for that one is copious amounts of gore. There's death left, right, and center. It's totally a thing. Camp We Don't Want Ya by Katie Rice. Another Strip Search contestant. There's going to be a few of those in this list. I love that show so much. I need to read some of the other people's things. Like, I've not read Cloud Factory. I've not read Sufficiently Remarkable, but I like both those artists, and I really should. But Camp We Don't Want You is by Katie Rice. She was another person who did really well in Strip Search. I will not reveal how well she did. As with any other people, I've realized I'm avoiding spoilers, because there's someone I know I've mentioned in comments would like Strip Search, and she's not looked at it yet, so let's just leave that out of that. Camp We Don't Want You is, it sounds like one of those Indian words. We don't want you. We don't want you. It's a camp where people send children that they kind of want to make disappear. And so I think The Breakfast Club, but bigger, and there's no way out ever. Everyone here is considered discardable because of something about them. Not all of them are nice people. Some of them are perfectly nice, but their parents or family or situations were terrible. The main character, Mordecai, has no idea why he's there. Not a clue. 17 is there because they were the 17th child. Yeah, their parents had too many, and affordance, and a young mouth, and yeah. No one knows why Brian's there either. Those are our main cast. It is funny, it is weird, and it's very interesting, the world that Katie builds on a totally in our universe little camp, but in extreme circumstances, like what will people do? What will they use to get through the day? What will they succumb to? There's a lot of like vague references to people becoming unhinged or just dying or finding bodies. It's very creepy. But it's a really funny comic though. It's really fun. Like at one point there's a supply drop of cats. Random things get supply dropped in, very rarely food. And the cats just kind of spring out everywhere, and everybody has a cat. There's cats all over the place. And from that point on, there is a cat in every page of the comic, hidden in the background somewhere. It's a really fun, like, little finding mission. Little secret thing. I totally recommend it, but Kids in Peril is a genre that not everybody likes because it is somewhat triggery and somewhat, oh my god, these poor children, terrible, terrible things. Why, adults, why? But if you're fond of, like the Roald Dahl kid stories with grit under their fingers kind of thing, I'd say that's pretty good for you. It's like a lovely reverse as well of The Lumberjanes, which is a physical comic I'm reading from Boom Studios. Is it Boom, or is it Kaboom, or is it Boombox? I'm really confused about this thing. But The Lumberjanes is really good. I'm loving it. It's one of the few physical comics I subscribe to. And that one's about a bunch of normal people at a normal-ish summer camp, but it's in woods that are full of horrors and creatures. And so they have to defend themselves. And they're all really well organized, and they have a camp counselor and everything. So that's the lovely reverse of more organized, but there's spooky things going on. Such spoop. There's wolves with third eyes, and a campsite, a boys' scouts camp, which seems to be somewhat terrifying and weirdly run, and potentially dangerous to everybody around them. Elguna Shive is potentially the comic that I followed for the longest that I still follow. It's coming up to 13 years old this year, and has over 2,000 pages in its history. I love this comic. I've recently started rereading it because I'd like to do a full recap, because 2,000 pages, not everyone will got time for that. But it's something I would totally recommend to people because it's got representation that very few other comics have, or very few other pieces of media at all have, such as a gender fluid character, a well-written trans character, sexual orientations and kinks of particulars out the wazoo, all over the shop. But that's not the main focus. It's not a sex comic. It's a coming-of-age story of a bunch of teenagers, late teens. And it begs an interesting question. It's like, what would happen to people who have these sexual orientations and people who have to come out to themselves and go through the normal rigmarole if they were in a world with magic and aliens and a gun that changes people's genders and magical marks that allow people to do weird and illusionary and magical summoning things, and vampires and angels and monsters, and it's all very interesting. There's some good action scenes, there's some very fun dialogue and brilliant comedy and comedic timing. Dan Shive has mastered the art of making a page work as a page, because that's such a difficult thing for so many webcomics, is when it ends and it's clearly halfway through a joke because the timing is off. I mean, if you read the early strips, as I am now, you see that it took him a long time to get there, because that is a hard thing to do, but now, oof, Zen master of page pacing. Love it. I love it for the world building far more than for the action scenes. Action's never really been my big deal thing. And I'm so excited at the moment, because Justin, who has been single for the entire comic because there's no other gay people he knows near him, has finally potentially met someone, and I'm hoping it goes well, and it might potentially go bad because of where the situation is and the plot is at the moment, but I'm really hoping it doesn't. I totally recommend that, though. Like, having a think, EGS may well be my favorite webcomic ever. I'm looking down the list. No, I think so. I think it's definitely the one that's had the most kind of big effects on me. There's a lot of really good revelations. Oh, that's another thing that happens. That's another thing that happens in this comic. Not to give away too many spoilers, but because they're young people who then have to transgress into like young adult people, you get what a lot of things don't do, which is a long period of someone being straight, vanilla, and then discovering over time that they aren't, and then having to come out to themselves, and then having to come out to other people. So often in all media, we have people who have to come out to their friends when they already understand themselves completely. Or they have to come out to themselves, but we've known them for like 20 minutes, so it's not really the biggest revelation. This is some proper seeded, like one person just came out to themselves as something after 13 years. This is of writing anyway. It's a lot less time in the comic, but that's pretty amazing. Two Kinds by Tom Fishbash. If I have pronounced his name correctly, I've probably not. Two Kinds is a safe-for-work, furry/anthropomorphic, inclusive comic in a fantasy universe where three major different races are in political disquiet. It's an interesting one. The old Templar, Trace, has lost his memories of him being a totally evil racist douchebag because of plot reasons that are explained far later in it, and falls in love with a Cadron, an anthropomorphic tiger girl named Flora, who's so fun and so funny and so klutzy, and it's brilliant. Together with Keith, a Pasitin, they have to avoid getting into too much trouble and dying while trying to make sense of the world which they're becoming more and more aware of, the complexities and evils of, and see if they can make a difference? ? It's interesting because they're more kind of figuring out what this world even is before agreeing to do stuff about it. This is a really good example of world building because there are maps and there are characters of different species and races that have tensions between them. There's great design. Like, you've got a variety of humans, as is real. You've got a variety of heights and personalities of the Pasitin, who are all, they look kind of wolfish, but they're not really they're not specifically definable as specific animals, which have big ears. But the Cadron, they have different species. So, like, you've got tiger Cadron and snow leopard Cadron, and other kind of themes were in that, and they come from different clans and tribes, from different areas, and it's really interesting to see how the world built up geographically and then built up politically with the tensions. And racism allegories and slave trades. Like, certain races can use magics and certain ones can't, and certain races have certain allegiances towards other ones. And it's really fascinating. It's full color, it's gorgeous, the art's come so far. Actually, El Gudishav has come so far as well. Both of these are really long-running comics. El Gudishav's been going for 13 years, Two Kinds has been going for 11, and they have such history to them, and such a backlog. Again, this is something I'm working on making a feature for. Totally recommend them both for funny, kind of sexy, kind of quirky antics, although neither of them actually have sex scenes, so these are safe to read at work, in theory. Depends what your workplace is. Like, if you work at Periscope Studios, knock yourself out. If you work at, like, Tesco's, probably don't. Clique Refresh by Amy T. Falcone. I know it's pronounced click, but it's like click, like clique, like with a Q, like friendship group. And so I kind of say that to remind myself to spell it differently. Although there's links to all of these in the description below, I've made sure there's it's such a long list. I'm so little through it, so you can find things there that you're interested in. Click Refresh. Amy is another one from Strip Search. She was amazing. She had this fantastic jokes and chemistry and discussions with Erica Moen, and they get on so well together. And they're both fantastic people, and I'm so happy to see Amy's work being so well received. I contributed to the Kickstarter, and I love it. It's about Ellie Cleary, a young girl who's moved to a new big city with dreams and inspirations and stuff she wants to do, but also massive anxieties and social fears and stuff she's got to deal with in order to get there. And her safe space is this game which she and her old friends all play together called Ether Ruin. It's an MMORPG, and as someone who met so many people and close friends through MMORPGs in uni, and is still staying in contact with so many people and meeting so many people through MMORPGs at the moment, I can really feel for a lot of the stuff in this comic. I really like it. It's almost like it was made for me at university, because there's Ellie having similar issues with sociophobia. She has a ferret, for crying out loud, as did I at the time. It's okay. Aside from, it's good for people other than me as well. It can be really funny. It can be incredibly clever. Like, there's a lot of silent scenes, like with her ferret Tuka, who doesn't speak because they're a ferret. That's the thing. And both of their misadventures around their apartment. And there's also quite serious stuff when she's trying to interact with the outside world. It's interesting. There's an old quote by John Cleese, which Mike loves, which is that people confuse somber and serious too much. So often people try to be serious while being somber, but it doesn't have to be. You can be serious while being so funny. And that's something that I think Click Refresh gets. Hell, it's something that all really great works seem to get, is that you can talk about serious stuff while being so funny about it, to make a point, to make something mean more to people, understand more to people. There's a lot more like that coming up. The Princess by Christine Smith. This is a Queer Press Grant Award winning and heart-melting work about a very young trans girl named Sarah who's trying to gain acceptance from herself and the people around her and be strong in the face of both childish and adult bullying, and inspiring people around her and her friends to look at their own lives and genders and question and accept things about themselves. It is really, really good. The art style is fantastically magical. It's developed a lot since it started, but it's so many bright, beautiful colors, and it's drawn kind of like a children's fantasy. It's, the bright colors you see in crayons and the kind of sketchy style, but drawn by an adult, so it actually is cohesive and understandable. It's really, really pretty, and there's so many good messages about tolerance, about the nature of friendship, about parenting in this. It tackles so many difficult questions, but it does something which I don't think enough media about trans people do, is that it's not sad. I mean, it's sad in parts, but generally it's about Sarah staying awesome and getting on with it and going to school and playtime and having lunch and wearing a crown because she thinks it's awesome and she's a princess. And she is a freaking princess. She's a princess of herself. That's the kingdom. So many times, especially in television, now it's happening at all, we have trans characters, which is great, but they are very rarely in positive situations or not depressed or just getting on with their lives. It was the same with gay characters for a very long time. You either had them be the comic relief because they're weird and different and lol, or be incredibly depressed because life is so hard. Wah. Now, there's places for both of these. It's just that when you end up with one or two things being the only format, that you have stereotypes. And I'm really glad there are comics like The Princess, which are so real, and they seem to get kids, and they get how humans actually react to things without caricaturing them, and showing that there's a wealth of different reactions to things through different characters, and some people getting things, some people not getting things, some people kinda getting things, or wanting to get things, and kinda processing and struggling with stuff at their own rate in order to get there. And I'm really glad this exists, and it's so bright and colourful and lovely. And if you read it and you like it, Christine's forum could do with a bit more busyness. So meet me there and we'll have a chat about it. I really want to be a part of that. Rooster Tales by Sam Orchard. Oh man, Rooster Tales. I can link you to the interview I did with Sam. This comic I have loved for years. It's another one about It's not just about being happy. The thing is, it's not just about being depressed either. It's very human. It's Sam Orchard's autobio comic about being trans male in New Zealand and working and loving and finding jobs and making art, doing conventions, globe-trotting, meeting Leah Worthington and Erica Moen, and just being awesome. And it's so good. It's so sweet. There's times when I read it and it's about difficult stuff or bullying or growing up, and I just cry. And there's times when it's just about him and Joe, his gentleman friend, cuddling up, loving who they are, loving their bodies, and loving each other. And I cry again, but for different reasons. It's so lovely. And yes, all the yeses. I also want to point out that Sam has done a series of comics about, well, the tagline is about who we are and how we love. It's called Family Portraits. I backed it on, it wasn't Kickstarter, it was I think it was some kind of fundraising platform. 3 issues are out presently, and I totally recommend checking them out. The first one's about himself and Joe, but the other ones are about painting a broad perspective of different people's stories and different lives that people lead. Moo and Kyo, Cute and Silly Fun by Matt Dyson. Let's get very far away from the seriousness for a bit. Moo and Kyo is a story about 2 friends, Kyo, who's very silly, and Moo, who happens to be a cow, and their silly fun adventures through fantasy lands, through their own lives, and oh man, Matt Dyson is the best comics writer for children I think anyone knows on the UK convention circuit. He's a lovely, charming guy who always comes up with games at every convention he's at, something to do, something to chat about, something to do down the pub afterwards. After we're done with the work for the day and we're all tired but want to do something fun and silly because we don't get to see these people often more than twice a year for some people. MCM's the only big, it's the one that big that everyone you know is definitely going to be there. Moon Kyo is totally one I'd recommend to anyone with kids or anyone who just wants something simple, something nice, and doesn't require crazy amounts of sadness or back reading. Because it's just good. It's so good. This is from the same guy who's made like cute little recipe books on how to make brownies and cakes and baking and birthday cards with someone's head filling with rainbows saying, "I'm so cute, I exploded a little." It's so brilliantly silly. I love it. Definitely. The website kind of goes on and off depending on Matt's writing things. So I think your best bet to get a nice, succinct storyline is to meet him at a convention and buy the comic from him. I say this partially because he's just an awesome person and I want more people to meet him and then see that because he's so super cool. And he's publishing now. He's publishing other things on a Monochrome Bear Media, including Luke Searle, his friend, who makes amazing puns. Totally recommend both these guys for meeting and for buying things from. I think I interviewed Matt actually a while ago for my old radio station, so I'll link that around if I can find it. Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal by Zach Weinersmith. Zach is an incredibly well-read clown. Think Monty Python. Their format was ridiculous, but they were so smart and so understanding of the world and ancient philosophers and politics and so many things that they could have Mrs. Bad Crumble and Mrs. Git meeting, was it Aristotle or something to try and confirm, or was it Plato, to question him about a principle of his that they were arguing over. It's marvelous. And Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal is very much in a Monty Python style. It's short, sometimes long comics. It varies upon what he's wanting to do with it. Often including philosophies on God and aliens and taxonomy and economy and mathematics and physics and the extinction of dinosaurs and really big clever things. But it's so dumb and funny in how it tackles them. It's very much a normal person looking at incredibly complex things, being told they're too complex and going, but isn't it kind of like this? And It's so funny to see him break stuff down. It's like, if XKCD, you look at it and go, whoa, I wish I could get this. I would totally go to SMBC, and I think it's less about informing people and more about jesting around with big ideas. SKCD is on this list as well. I should skip to that now anyway. SKCD as well, by Randall Munro, who's also put out a new book called What If, and I heard so many good things, I want to get it. SKCD is a similar thing to SMBC, but it's also somewhat educational and moving in places. It's stick people having fun with physics and science and the nature of the universe and the human condition and radioactivity and experiments and really weird answers to really mundane questions. SMBC and XKCD, blah, are the smartest comics I think I read. Not only in terms of like background reading, but in terms of content, and I totally recommend them both. Go Get a Roomie and Headless Bliss by Chloe C. Go Get a Roomie is her very long-term project about multiple things. When it started out, it was about a girl who loves girls and beer and boobs, and just kind of sleeps where she can and crashes at people's houses, goes to this bar and is really just fun and free. And then she meets Lillian, or Lazy Tyke, or LT for short, who is mostly unconscious. She's so asleep, she seems locked in her own head, isolated from people, unconnecting. And these people who are so opposites of each other meet and learn to understand each other and foster an interesting relationship between each other. And it's debatable as to whether what they have is asexual or just romantic, platonically. It's fascinating how much they've both adapted to being more like each other over the course of knowing each other. And then they have this amazing gallery of friends with all kinds of kinks and all kinds of quirks and all kinds of beings. I love Richard and Ramona, the twins. Oh, the triplets now, they've actually really revealed their other sibling, who's a polyamorous filmmaker, which is super cool. I'm loving it. Chloe is an incredibly intelligent lover of silliness, I think is how I describe that one. And Go Get a Roomie is totally recommendable to anyone who feels like they are underrepresented, because there'll be something like you in there, to people who want just fun stories about queer people rather than sad ones. This is another good one to look for. Headless Bliss is her new project, which is in full colour and is a fantasy world with demons and horned creatures and poodles, and it's really, really new, so I don't really know what it's about yet. It's only like 15 pages in. I totally recommend getting on that now if you like webcomics, because I trust in Chloe. Having seen some of the concept arts, having seen her Twitter, having seen Go Get a Roomie for all these years, she might have a long overarching plan, or these characters will just become so fun. They're already pretty fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes. I'm so excited. The Young Protectors by Alex Wolfston. Remember how I was raving ages ago about how Artifice is one of the best comics ever? Well, this is the next comic by that same creator. Whilst Artifice is a short but big implications comic about a automaton and a human who meet and fall in love and do sexy things and have to question the nature of programming and duty and all that jazz. The Young Protectors is a very human story in a superhero world. And I always like when superheroes are used as like a lens, a black mirror to look back at some things about society with and see, well, what if this? Or what if this was rephrased like this? What if this metaphor? And that's the kind of thing that I think science fiction and superheroes should be used for. I find it so dull seeing, and then the big muscly man punched the big muscly man who was darker and therefore evil. And it just looks stupid as fuck. The Young Protectors, on the other hand, tells the story of Kyle, or Red Hot, who has an interesting relationship brought to him by the Annihilator, a much older supervillain, and is the only gay person he thinks he's ever met. And so things happen. It's complicated. Sometimes I do convention help with certain people, and I was talking to Tab Kimpton, who does Chaos Comics and Shades of A, about this one, and for the longest time we were so worried it was going to go in a certain direction, because there's so much really dark and deep stuff going on in here, really worrying shit, and we were like, okay, the next few months we'll discover whether Alex is a total shameless perv who we should guard against, or a complete genius who is playing with us so beautifully in a big game of sexy chess. And it's the latter. I had to wait until it happened before I put Young Protectors on the recommended list, because, oh god, it's so good and so harsh. Plenty of trigger warnings around abuse and loneliness and depression, and homophobia, and just, it's so good though. It's so good. He did it. He did it. He did it. I'm so happy. And yes, it looks like it's potentially part of a very long series, and it's been separated into chapters, unlike Artifice, which is a one-off. So I totally trust in Alex from what he's shown so far. He has a big plan going on, and I can't wait to see how much more of it he reveals in the coming pages. Fruit Loop and Mr. Downbeat. This is a weird one that got recommended to me by a friend. It is so strange and silly and fun. At the same time, it makes some really good points. A guy moves house and is immediately besotted. The neighbor is besotted with him. Someone who is too young to kind of do the getting over. It's just like, oh my god, this person's so hot. I'm in love. In a very silly way. And he doesn't talk to anyone. So again, like with Rumi, you've got a person and a foil, and them learning to understand each other. But it's in a world which is increasingly not making sense and being kind of ridiculous and fun. Like there's a value supermarket where a sun god appears to arrive and then demand a sacrifice for the sake of low prices, and he eats one of the cultists, and it's very weird. I have no idea where this comic is going, but it's having a whale of a time getting there. Totally recommended for surrealist randomness and humor. A Human Star by Blue Delaquanti. Definite interview link for the Kickstarter that happened and went so well, and oh my god, this is good. This is sci-fi used well. This is pulling up those dark mirrors, as well as having fascinating what-if future histories of, well, what if we discovered this at this point in time instead? And what if we advanced into robotics and into AI technology? What if this? And in a kind of Automata, iRobot style, robots are everywhere. But in kind of like a Doctor Who, the Titanic Christmas episode style. Robots and cyborgs are part of everyday life. They are accepted. They are a thing. They have rights. They have feelings. They are at that point in technology. And there's brilliant descriptions and discussions as to how they got there and why. It follows Alan Sterling. I don't need to talk about it too much, I think, because we've already got this whole interview and I've discussed it before and I love it so much. Alistair Sterling, the creator of modern robotics from long time ago with his theories and tinkering and ideas, is revived in a robot body. No idea as to how or why. And then reunites with his old business partner and other things partner, Brendan, who's taken over his company in a good way, kind of kept his legacy going since. There's so much emotion in their re-meeting because this is the man that he worked with and a man he loved who's come back. And he tried to make robots of and tried to make into a machine so he could bring him back from the dead, but he couldn't. And instead, he got Sulla, who is his daughter, who's got a lot in common with him, a brilliant mind, inquiring, robotics prodigy, and that's because she was him. She was a failed replicant of Alistair, who has his face, but discussing it with Brendan, wanted to be different, wanted to be herself, and said that she's a girl. And so she's a trans girl robot dealing with the issues of meeting her hero / creator and trying to reconcile the weirdnesses of that, while also being very interested in the flirting game with a very interesting character I hope we get to see more of in the coming pages. But also Brendan and Alistair having to figure out the angst of, well, I lost you forever and I made peace with that, and now I don't, so what do we do? It's fascinating, it's beautifully drawn, there's dream sequences and paisley patterns and actual scientific thought and design and a beautiful concept and everything. So many beautiful robots and human pieces that are robotic pieces. If you want to know more about it, I'd recommend either reading it or clicking on the interview, which I'm linking somewhere around here on the screen. Though, just so you're aware, there's some almost sex scenes. There's intimacy scenes. There's no genitalia shown yet. But just be aware of that if you want to read this one at work. Oh, also thinking about it, The Young Protectors definitely has some not safe for work scenes. But it's mostly cool. Eff Skin by, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, I'm already sorry, Sfe Our Monster? SFE with an accent, Monster. This is an interesting comic that's gotten a lot of praise from big artists because of the concepts it's putting out there and the interestingness of it. Sfe, like our main character, is genderqueer and goes by different pronouns. Sfe uses he and they, and I believe that Eff uses they as well. And it's about a fisherman who meets it's about a fisher who meets the Skelkie, who are thought to be extinct, and through magical hijinks and unfortunate curses, maybe, they suddenly have a quest to embark upon to separate themselves from each other. And it's really interesting and so pretty, and there's so much food, lovely looking food. It's set in an alternate kind of British Columbia, where cities called townships make up the block of civilization, and the monsters and skelkies and sea creatures swim through kelp forests to avoid beach walkers and mask wearers, and it's very interesting. It's a very good setting. I'm liking the world building of it. I think everyone's just so excited for what it is and just wants to keep on reading and keep on watching, and yeah, definitely. Dovetail by Corey Michelle does not exist yet. I am really, really, really excited for it. So it's in my bookmarks already. It's going to be a fantasy comic. There's going to be trans characters and the Queen of the Forest, who looks amazing and like Alaska Thunderfuck 5000 from Drag Race, which I know people are privy to because of the picture on their Tumblr. And it's so exciting. I want it all the time, but I'm so bad with announcements that I've decided to put it in my favorites and then see it every day that I open my favorites. If Corey, if you put on advertising, you're probably going to get some revenue from me. That's just the thing. I'm super excited partly because of the content that has been alluded to through Corey's Twitter, and partly because of Corey's previous work, The Prince of Cats. Prince of Cats is totally finished now. You can read it in its entirety. Warning, it's really sad, but also really good. It's really human, very believable. It's a story about first love. It's a story about first love in a small town, and being gay in a town where that's not really a thing, and having to work and having to do other things and having to what do you have to sacrifice to keep your family happy? What do you have to sacrifice to keep a relationship going? Is it worth it? Will it work out? Will any of this maintain past teenage? It's sad and shocking how real it is, and it has such a bittersweet ending. It's so good. Ugh. It's an incredibly ambitious comic with gorgeous watercoloring. And Owen, the Queen of Sass, might be my favourite character in anything ever. Again, totally recommend it, but be careful, you might cry. A lot. John Troutman. That's the name of the person making these comics, and his website is troutcave.net, where he publishes a lot of different things. I'm still kind of getting used to the new navigation of his new website, so I'm not entirely sure what I'm following. I meant to follow Mary Elizabeth Sock, which I've been following since it started, and I interviewed him about a while ago in an interview that I don't think even worked out. It was when I was finishing my time with the radio station. I'll see if I can find it. I'll see if I can put it up here as the thing. But Mary Elizabeth Sock is about a girl and murder and love and a small town and weird stuff. That's all just a basis for incredibly good humor and character interaction. I love Mary Elizabeth. She's fantastic. Her boyfriend is fantastic. Everything is fantastic. He also makes several other comics. The Gospel of Carol I love as well. That's his most recent project, and that's okay. Some background. His oldest comic and his longest running is Lit Brick, which is where he went through the entire Northern English Anthology, Volume 1. He's still working on Volume 2, I believe, and riffed satirically and made comics about each of the stories within it. He also then did some other ones, such as a bit of Shakespeare. He also went into the English Anthology, and just having fun with literature. And it was educational and entertaining and awesome. The Gospel of Carol is that, but for the Bible. And so he has taken every single version of events and combined it into one thing and been like, what if they were all canon? And so it's really interesting to learn all these things about the different potential stories that could not possibly go together, and how would they? Also featuring his own input of She-Jesus, the cheesecake deity, from Lit Brick, who appeared several times. Basically, he made Jesus a girl in order to show it was different and not offensive, and made her awesome and lovable and entertaining and super feminist. And in the Gospel of Carol, she's Jesus' sister, and she's the daughter of God. She has powers and prophetic visions and can see all of time and space simultaneously in a Dr. Manhattan way, and so she makes pop cultural references that other people don't get because it's like 0 AD or 20 AD, and she's awesome. Her brother, Jesus, is quite a good teacher and a good listener, and people respect him because he has a penis. So there's difficulties there. And then they both have, I think it's Thomas is their brother? One of the disciples is apparently in one version Jesus' brother, which is weird and interesting. It takes one of the most known about and least read books in the world and does with it what he did with Norton. And it's so funny and so much fun. John Troutman gets humor so well. I adore his work. He's also a big friend of Dan Shive from El Goonish Shive, and they've done some work for each other and guest things and guest art and fan art. John appears in Dan's EGS NP, which is the side stories that are usually non-canonical, when his characters go to a convention and meet him. And Dan's done some guest strips about the Great Gatsby. That were weird. Really, really weird, Dan. What are you doing?